The blockbuster spy thriller Dhurandhar absolutely blew audiences away, especially with its huge claim of being based on incredible true events.
It's a seriously gripping story, right? But it leaves us all asking one massive question. Where does the real story stop and the Hollywood magic begin? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down.
All right, so here's our game plan for separating the facts from the fiction. First, we'll look at the real-life events the movie is built on. Then, we'll get into the real people behind the film's most memorable characters. After that, we'll dive into the big creative liberties the filmmakers took. And finally, we'll talk about why mixing truth and fiction makes for such a powerful story.
Okay, first things first. Let's ground ourselves in what actually happened. The film is really smart about anchoring its story in several major events that are 100% true.
You remember that unbelievably tense scene on the hijacked plane in Kandahar, right? The hero tries to get the hostages to chant with him to show some fight, but they're just frozen in fear. It feels like something written purely for dramatic effect, but believe it or not, this moment is pulled directly from reality.
And this is a direct quote from Ajit Duval, the actual negotiator on that flight. He really did go on that plane. He told the passengers they were going to be safe, but the fear was so thick you could cut it with a knife. They just stayed silent. That's a chilling, real-life detail that the film captured perfectly.
And the movie's connection to reality doesn't stop there. The heroism of Constable Kamelis Komar Yadav during the 2001 Parliament attack? Totally true. The shadowy Kanani brothers running a giant fake currency ring? Oh, they were very real. In fact, they were so notorious that even the US government was after them. And that scene where terrorists are watching live TV news for updates during the 26/11 attacks? That's based on very real criticism of the media's coverage at the time.
You hear the villain in the film say this phrase a lot. Bleed India with 1,000 cuts. That's not just some cool, evil-sounding movie line. It's a real-world military strategy. The idea, which came from former Pakistani President Zia-ul-Haq, was to avoid a direct all-out war by just constantly chipping away at India with smaller, ongoing conflicts. It's the real ideology behind the whole conflict in the movie.
All right, now let's get into the film's most complicated character, the antagonist, Raman Dekait. The real person he was based on was seen in two completely opposite ways, as a monster and as a hero.
So who was the real Raman Dekait? Well, he was a total paradox. On one side, you have this brutal gangster involved in everything from drug smuggling to kidnapping. His gang wars literally tore Karachi apart and cost thousands of lives. But on the other side, in his own neighborhood of Liari, people saw him as a savior. He gave people jobs, he built roads and schools, he basically created a government where the actual government was missing.
This quote from someone in his own circle really gets to the heart of it. To them, yeah, he was a criminal, but he was also the only one doing anything for them. In a place where people felt abandoned, he stepped in, and that made him a legend to many.
And get this, he wasn't just a local Robin Hood figure. Raman Dekait was a serious political player. His gang provided security for huge political rallies, even for a former prime minister. That gave him a kind of legitimacy that made him so much more than just another crime lord.
Okay, so let's flip the coin. We've talked about the antagonists. What about the heroes of the film? Who were the real-life cops and spies that inspired them?
Sanjay Dutt's swaggering super cop is based directly on a guy named Chaudhry Aslam. And let me tell you, the real guy was an incredibly intense and controversial figure. He was one of Pakistan's most feared encounter specialists, known for taking on criminals and terrorists head-on. He was the man sent to clean up Liari, and he was such a target that he survived multiple assassination attempts before he was finally killed. And our Madhavan's character, the brilliant intelligence chief pulling the strings? Well, that is pretty much a direct portrayal of Ajit Doval. His career in intelligence is legendary, from negotiating the Kandahar hijacking to running all sorts of counterinsurgency ops. He's the perfect real-world model for a movie spy master.
Now, the main villain, Major Iqbal, is interesting because he's not based on just one person. He's a composite, a mashup of real figures. His ideology, that 1,000 cuts idea, comes straight from General Zia-ul-Haq. But his personality and actions, that of a cold, strategic terrorist mastermind, are heavily inspired by Ilyas Kashmiri, a key planner of the 2008 Mumbai attacks.
Okay, we've talked about the facts. Now, for the fun part, let's get into the fiction. Where did the movie just make stuff up?
The single biggest invention in the whole movie is the Dhurandhar operation itself. You know, the idea of taking convicts on life sentences and training them to be secret agents? It's a fantastic idea for a spy movie. But there is absolutely no public record of any program like this ever existing.
And what about Ranveer Singh's hero? Yeah, he's completely fictional. He's inspired by stories of undercover agents, but he himself never existed. And the way Rahman Dakite dies, in the movie, the hero gets him. In real life, he was killed in a police encounter led by the real Chaudhry Islam, and that death is still super controversial, with his family claiming it was a setup. But the biggest leap of all is connecting the gang wars in Lyari directly to terror attacks in India.
This comment from a viewer in Karachi really puts it in perspective. The Lyari gang wars were a brutal, local tragedy. The only people who suffered were the people of Karachi. The movie's decision to link that local conflict to international terrorism, that's the fictional glue that holds the spy story together.
So when you put it all together, what do you got? How do all these pieces of fact and fiction create something so compelling?
The formula is actually pretty clever. You start with a foundation of real, traumatic events that everybody remembers. Then you fill that world with characters based on these larger-than-life real people. And finally, you weave a totally fictional story through it all to connect the dots and create this incredible thriller. Dhurandhar isn't a documentary, it's a fictional story built on the framework of a very real, very violent history.
And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating and honestly, a pretty tough question to think about. The movie is amazing entertainment, no doubt. But when a story is built on the real pain, the real trauma, and the real lives of actual people, what is the storyteller's ultimate responsibility? Is it to the facts, to the victims, or is it just to tell a good story? It's definitely something worth thinking about.